Okay, the Victorian period. Name for Queen Victoria. You know, and my orientation for a while is still going to be English and American. I haven't forgotten about the rest of the world. But during the Victorian period, from about 1850, maybe 1840, up to about 1920, probably earlier than that. I use World War I as the end of it, really. Some history. Well, first of all, it's sometimes called the 19th century, or the 1800s, if you lop off the Romantic period. It also has a nickname, the Age of Progress. You see, if you can remember that chart, those swings back and forth. Well, the Romantics had grave doubts about what the Industrial Revolution was doing, but it passed. And when we get back into the Victorian era, we're off and running again. They're so excited about what industry can do. During this time, so Britain at this time was at its peak of power, the British Empire. There's a saying that the sun did not set on the British Empire for 100 years or so, which was literally true because the British Empire wrapped the entire globe. When it set on England, it was shining on India. When it set on India, it was shining on Hong Kong. When it set there, it was shining on Canada. I hope I didn't get that backwards. But anyway, and Victoria was the queen. Her husband Albert died early. She was a widow. And in so many ways, she set the tone for the entire period, Queen Victoria. During this time, there were great feats of engineering. I think I'll list them under classics because we pretty much value them all still. I'll put that under classics. In the United States, the American Gold Rush occurred. There's the expression, the 49ers, for the men that went west in the gold rush. Well, if you can remember that was 1849, that can serve to locate that in time for your history. 1849, the gold rush. The American Civil War, Civil War occurred more or less in those years. Hugely traumatic to the United States. More Americans died in that war than all the other wars put together. Americans, mind you. The 1890s had a nickname, the gay 90s. Kids get excited about that word gay. It only meant happy, and after the Civil War was over, this is American history now. The Titanic sank. That fired the imagination and still does. 100 years ago this year, 1912 it sank. World War I began. I think it was 1914. And that is going to be, I'm going to talk about that after I come back from Europe. I'm going to hold the 20th century off till then. All right, characteristics. So what was this period like? Well, the way I try to explain it is there was a very great concern and a belief in properness. They really believed that there was a proper way to speak, a proper way to drink your tea, a proper way to form the letter A, a proper way to dress if you were a school teacher with a tie, a proper way to sit in your chair. They really believed that. And it was largely defined by Queen Victoria. But what's more important is they really did believe in that. Now things are so different. I mean, there are many ways to do things, but they believed it proper. In my teaching career, I've always had an issue with the concept of proper English. I say standard English. I don't use the word proper because I think maybe I'm too modern in my linguistics to think about that. It depends on the situation. All right, well, sex was almost unmentionable. Now, boy, as soon as I say sex, kids that are going to sleep in class, all of a sudden their heads will snap. Like, whoa, what did you say, sex? 14-year-olds. But you know, and so still, it's a little weird to have a teacher mention it, but you know, it has shock value. The Victorians had such a funny attitude about it. I mean, it's just, well, you don't talk about it. If a woman got pregnant, she didn't go out in public, really. As a matter of fact, a woman who was married shouldn't be a teacher. It wasn't proper. And you see it in women's fashion. And women's fashion has taken a lot of teasing over this. The hemline all the way to the floor. The neckline clear up here. Unless you were a saloon girl in the West or something. Sleeves down here, gloves, hats. It covered almost everything. And yet, amazingly, women still managed to look feminine. At least in my eye, they did. But they had a double standard, was what it was. You just didn't talk about it. Jokes about that, which I won't go into. The heroes of the time, I think every time sort of has its certain heroes. Nowadays, maybe it's athletes. I don't know. In the Renaissance, I think it was maybe artists. But in the Romantic period, it was like, oh, how to explain a romantic hero? It's sometimes called an anti-hero. Well, you know, back in the Romantic period, they said that women actually found men who looked sickly, pale, like they were wasting away. That women found them attractive because it looked like they were being consumed by passion. It's hard to imagine that. You know, if a man had a ruddy complexion, big and buff, and this is romantic, I've read before that women would say, well, he'd make a fine workhorse or an ox or something, but not a mate. You wanted a mate that was full of passion. Well, anyway, that was romantic. In the Victorian era, I think the heroes of the time were the inventors and the engineers. There was such enthusiasm for that in this age of progress. Thomas Edison is the American example of that, which I can use. Well, that was quick, but that leaves it. So next week, I can deal with the classics that we have from the Victorian era, or some of them. There are so many. See you Monday.